Hello. I have a book. The book is by George Orwell. It's called Burmese Days. I read this book because I just read the Paul Theroux novel about George Orwell, Eric Blair, when he was basically a kid. He was 19 when he went off to Burma to serve as a cop in this colonial situation. Well, he came back, and actually in the novel of in the Paul Theroux novel by Paul Theroux, which is called Burma Sahib. He is starting to write this novel in that book, although it's not his first novel. So what we have here is a picture of life in Burma, and it's a really ugly picture of life in Burma. I put this book on Facebook that I was reading the book, and another Facebook person who is a broadcaster and a podcaster now, named Bill Weinberg, has a program, podcast called something Vortex. Anyway, I will give you the information for that if you want to listen to that, because he provides a lot more information about Burma, like today, and what has happened since then. And he gives his review of the book, which is pretty harsh, I thought. Yeah, it's an ugly book. It's an ugly place. It's an ugly story. I mean, and I think the ugliness is appropriate. There's N-words in this book, lots of N-words. And I think that is correct, because I think that is actually how they were speaking at this, this little colonial town in Burma where all this stuff goes on in the book. What goes on in the novel is that it's about not about a policeman, which is what Eric Blair was, or George Orwell. It is about a lumber guy who works for lumber. And so he's not an official in any sort of way like that. He's not military, he's not a cop. He's just, a guy in town. And it gives, he's been there a long time. The whole colonial thing, British colonial thing, goes on for years and years and years. And apparently people spend their whole lives in these colonial situations. Actually, Eric Blair himself was born in India or someplace because his dad was an opium inspector or something. So yeah, these people spend their entire lives there, and so he provides a picture of a really sort of decadent culture. I mean, the opening scene is of these guys getting drunk before breakfast, basically. They go to the club, like all these British towns or Burmese towns that are occupied by the British have these clubs in them, the British clubs, where they go and do their British thing and try to act like they're back home, playing billiards and bridge and so forth, and getting really drunk. I mean, they're getting drunk, early in the morning. And so he goes on to present this picture of this really debauchery, this sort of decadent society that is the colonial system, and it's permeated everyone. It's touched the natives as well. One of the prime villains of the story is a corrupted native who is using his position. the way they set up things, the British colonial system, is they set it up so actually, as Bill Weinberg, when you listen to the podcast, he tells us about that, how they occupied the Burma with millions of people with a couple thousand troops, and yet and they had these teams of fellow travelers, I guess, of like Indians who would serve as their military and police. So they had all these functions that were the people of the colonial states, the places that were taken over, are recruited and work as the people who are making the whole system function. So one of these guys in the book is is really very fat and decadent Burmese guy. Is the plot of the book is that he's trying to somebody has to join the club. There's a rule that comes down from above, from the colonial government or whatever, that we're going to there's a certain sense of things loosening up, and we're going to have a native in each of the clubs. So you should have at least one native of Burma in your British colonial club. So the story is about who is going to be into this club, and there's this doctor who is a friend of Foley, the lumber merchant, who wants to get that position. And then there's this other guy who creates this big plot to make the doctor look like he's engaged in revolutionary actions, nationalist struggles, which he isn't. But so there's all that stuff going on in the book. So what it shows is the decadence of the whole thing. How it's not like it's not cut and dried where the locals are against the British, and a lot of the British coming brought all this modernity to these places, railroads, hospitals, schools, all that kind of stuff, which some of the people liked and took advantage of. So there's at the heart of the story is really a love story and shame about the Foley has a blot in his face. I don't know why he did that. He has a birthmark on his face that he has to turn away to hide, and he's ashamed of it. Now, in the Paul Theroux book, the novel, Eric Blair is ridiculed by the others because of his height. He's called Stretch or Lofty or whatever because he was 6'3". Whereas in this book, it's not that. So this is not really Eric Blair, this character, but it has lots of the connections to what the Eric Blair of the Theroux novel. The Eric Blair of the Theroux novel is someone who indulges in how the women have been prostituted in service of the British colonials, and keeps a woman, or a couple of different ones along the way. And in this novel, there's a lot of that, where this guy that works for the lumber company in town, when he goes to town, he has a woman who she takes herself as his bride. And when another British girl comes into town who is eligible for marriage, young and pretty and so forth, and British, he abandons the local woman, who becomes enraged at him and keeps demanding money, and ultimately shames him. So there's a lot of this sexual guilt, and going on what is in the Through novel, not knowing anything about the facts of the matter, I can only assume that Eric Blair himself did have this shame for indulging in the prostituted women, and felt that that was a mark on his future and made him unlovable to British women, wholesome women. So all the customs of the British, it's all going on within this novel. There's some exciting scenes of battle. Ultimately, as I said, there's nobody good in this novel. Everybody's bad. Everybody's corrupt. Everybody's like screwed up. Everybody's, either insane or drunk or trying to get advantage or being, horrible to everyone, and beatings. There is a big scene of rebellion where the locals all come around and start pelting. They have them cornered in the club, and there's a lot of action going on where a bunch of the local people, unarmed, come upon the club and trash the club to a certain degree. But then everything goes back to normal. So I thought it was an interesting book, and I really liked it. And it doesn't pull punches at the end. Now, I was, as I said about Keep the Aspidistra Flying, I read Keep the Aspidistra Flying some years ago. There's a movie of that, which isn't very good, but anyway, there's, in Keep the Aspidistra Flying, it's all a story about this guy who is in advertising, and he leaves advertising to become a poet. So he's trying to be a poet, but meanwhile, it's all about money and all about not having money. And ultimately, at the end of that book, he ends up, knocking up his girlfriend and basically going into a family thing. And so kind of coming out as sort of a sellout in a way, but, going for family and love instead of this isolated life of the poet who was starving all the time and doesn't even have any money for tea. So that doesn't happen in this. It doesn't. There is no redemption for anybody in this book. Really, none of them. And the Foley comes to a troubling end, one might think, and I'm not going to tell you what goes on. In case you want to read the book, I won't spoil it. But I thought the ending was quite satisfactory given the circumstances, and it is a kind of a metaphor to when you build a society like this, when you rely on this colonial system and put so many of your people into it that it corrupts them internally, it tears them apart, and ultimately they are dead inside and might as well be dead. And so the whole colonial system is like killing itself, killing the country that is the colonial center of in this case, Britain. It is hollowing out any of the people who are doing this work, corrupting them, making them horrible people, out, kicking around the locals in, these kind of innocent people out in Burma, whipping them and shooting them, massacres, and banging them with canes and bleeding them, and all this stuff. Just the whole horror show of bad behavior, and just unacceptable stuff that these governments do with all their power and their ruthlessness. So, Burmese Days, I thought it was good. I think I should read some of the other early Orwell books. I don't really know that much about Orwell. Orwell and or like I read a few. I read Coming Up for Air, but many years ago, somewhere around the same time, I guess that I read Keep the Aspidistra Flying. I think I read that after Coming Up for Air. So anyway, I should probably go back and look at these novels again, because Eric Blair or George Orwell is not really like, I feel like I got more of a fix on like Aldous Huxley, in that maybe Aldous Huxley lived longer and he's sort of more he lived in the United States a long time, and he got involved in the psychedelic movement and so forth. He's somehow more of a modernist figure, and his take on totalitarianism in Brave New World is kind of really more accurate to what we are getting here in the United States, as far as the ultimate, I think, turn toward a totalitarian system, which all these centralizing power structures keep pointing toward, and people go no, and yet it keeps going in that direction, and it's hard to keep it from not doing that. So yeah, this is a library book I got from the library, and yeah, so Burmese Days, yeah, from the author of Animal Farm in 1984. Yeah, Animal Farm, did I ever even read Animal Farm? No, Animal Farm just sort of seems like a kind of, obvious metaphor or something, and it's not that, or allegory, I guess. And, it's whatever. It's so played by the CIA. The CIA financed an animated version of Animal Farm in the early 50s. So yeah, and 1984 is so much about the Soviet Union and so forth. So yeah, because Orwell had this sort of socialist, democratic socialist thing. I guess he was not a communist, and of course saw the dangers of what happened in the Soviet Union, which was, of course, horrible, but and fascism, so forth. So and struggled and fought in Catalonia, and that's a great thing. And Orwell was fabulous, and it's too bad he didn't live a little longer, and it would be interesting to see where he had gone into, had he lived into the 60s, and 70s, where he would have ended up going. Of course, that's what you can say about all these people, like, what would Phil Oakes be like now, that kind of stuff. It's like, now, we'll never know, because, they're gone. So I guess that's all I have to say about this, and inadequate as it was. So yeah, I can listen to Bill Weinberg if you want, something Vortex. And thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll continue to do this whether there's a few people watching or not. It doesn't matter to me. So thank you for watching. Bye-bye.